The idea of producing a series of shadow curtains evolved in conjunction with some of the works that had come earlier, but specifically because I was thinking about this very strange situation wherein life is changing very rapidly at the early part of the 21st century, especially with regard to the traditions of making and the traditions of writing, as I think I've talked about earlier. These kinds of notions that are passed on from generation to generation. We learn how to make things from other people who know how to make them. We learn our handwriting skills from a teacher who teaches us how to write. And at one point, it seemed to me that I could continue the series that were based on the stencils that I had incorporated into other works and begin to fragment them, collage them, build them into some new images that kind of hybridized the conditions that were possible but that the original intent was not connected with in the original group of stencils. So I began to hybridize birds with human forms. And in doing so, I felt as though I was creating some subjects that looked as though they were able to take off. What? Like angels. We see angels, envision angels with wings. That state of kind of being able to rise and fall, to be present and absent simultaneously, seemed to beautifully join the whole notion of the projections of those images onto the walls, so that the shadow was an echo of the subject, and both of them found a marriage, a place together that were important in relationship to one another. All of this was produced in a series of curtains that move. They're hanging on tracks, and very simply by manipulating the fabric, one can condense the image. I thought, what an interesting idea, to be able to make a drawing on a piece of cloth and let the support which holds that drawing be part of revealing or concealing it. So the idea of these curtains, which actually could be used in a functional situation, is intended to be to accompany the people who live with them. That is, like telling a story, you can reveal parts or conceal parts. You can compress them completely together so you no longer see the story, or, as I've just done, open to reveal it. A couple of years ago, in a wonderful trip to Guatemala, I was so impressed by the intensity of the textiles. It occurred to me that I should go back to the loom, start weaving again, and create a counterpart for the shadow curtains. It was a really interesting point wherein I began to look at the space within the weavings and thought in terms of the way in which subjects in the shadow curtains could inhabit the space of these weavings. One thing led to the next until finally I decided that that pairing is quite interesting, especially because of the way in which the vivid quality of the curtain and the elusive quality of the shadow curtain kind of play against each other. You notice there's resemblance or repetition, actually, of form. This falling child that is representing the kind of loss of continuity among generations within the world in which we're living right now, is used in both cases. And here, a subject which I discovered along the way and like very much, perhaps a little reminiscent of the figure of John in depictions of the biblical book, the Apocalypse, wherein John is shown in many traditional illuminated manuscripts off to the side telling the story. And in this case, I created my own figure telling the story, the blindfolded woman, who we've seen in a number of other of my projects, morphed together with parts of a goose and parts of a turkey with strange bird-like feet standing on this orb, a ring, an apple, whatever it may be, But anyway, standing in judgment, except it's judgment that she can't make completely because she can't see what's really going on. Okay. I really enjoyed the idea of one work begetting the next, about this generational notion of relationship among the works that I'm developing. And so after the first of the weavings, there had to be a second. In fact, there's a series of 4 of them. And one thing that I'd point out that I really kind of enjoy thinking about here is the way in which the light changes in each of the 4 pieces as the whiteness within the work increases. It's almost like an increase in the light from the back of the woven plane, illuminating what stands in front of it. Again, the relationship between subjects and the curtains that hang adjacent to them, and each time in each of the succession of 4 pieces, a little bit more distancing from the subject matter here to something else that happens within the curtains. Simultaneity is very much a part of the world that we live in today. We're living in a time where old hierarchies have broken down, where multiple points of view kind of come into clash, come into relationship with one another. That interests me a lot, especially as a means to approach visualization in a work of art. And so I've been involved recently in a series of pieces, including some new dexterity games that likewise are coming off of that basis, where this and that come together, not always with an intended meaning, but not a specific meaning. The intended meaning being that one senses that the relationships are significant, that they're important, and that if one searches these works, one might begin to come to one's own understanding about what they mean. I had a wonderful experience a year ago as I read Italo Calvino's book, The Baron in the Trees. And it just left me with an impression that has stayed with me strongly enough that I wanted to do a work in response. And actually, the piece that's behind me is kind of going to be related to a whole series of works related to the subject. I have to tell you the story because it really is a wonderful one, at least the introduction to the story. The story takes place in Italy, wherein there is a family led by the senior member of the family, the father, who is very much in love with his family history. And he insists that every day at noontime meal, all of his family members wear traditional clothing, formal clothing, come to the dining table and behave as his ancestors behaved. Well, one day his 3 children, a daughter about 14 and 2 younger brothers, get in an enormous fight. The boys are constantly teasing the girl. The girl is constantly upset with them and following a big trick that had been played on her the night before. The boys are arguing with her and she's shouting back when the father says, "Shut up." Well, actually he doesn't say shut up. He says, "Please stop your bickering or leave the table without food." And the boy, the elder boy, has heard this before. And he thinks to himself for a moment, and then I can just see him as he gets up from the table, pushes his chair back, walks to the end of the dining room, looks back at his family and says, "I will leave, but I will never come back again." And he proceeds to go out onto the terrace where there is a large oak tree, and he climbs the oak tree, occupies the branches up above, and as the luck would have it for the story, I mean, the interest in this story, he never comes down. He lives his entire life in the branches of those trees. So following the project, the expandable curtains that I made earlier, it occurred to me it would be really interesting to do a curtain that's about 40 feet long, where one pulls the front of it and it opens up and there are various episodes. The curtain, when closed, suggests the dining room where the family is enjoying the meal together, And when the curtain is opened, one gets a kind of a psychological sense of moving to another place, of going beyond that wall into the space. Maybe this is the space of the boy's dreams, the space of the imagination of the reader as he or she follows the book.